Dad, why is American government the best government?
Because of our endless appeals system.
Some questions are flawed, and the only way to engage with them is to criticize them.
What is the subject of your essay?
Why is American government the best government in the world?
Your teacher crafted that question?
Yeah, why?
It's like a lie, but by omission. However, this omission is done in the framing. And to answer the question straight up would be missing the most interesting aspects of the topic.
A, does America have the best government in the world? And B, what constitutes the best government? Is it crime? Is it poverty? Literacy? In America, definitely not best. Perhaps not even better than most. We do have a very entertaining government.
Dad.
This is how I felt about the idea of what Bond can learn from Andor. This was a headline I saw and immediately I just disagreed with it. It implies that Andor and Bond are similar, that they are both just IP acquired by big studios. It reduces Andor to a spin-off of Star Wars, and notes that Bond will want to make spin-offs too. However, it stresses that most Star Wars spin-offs weren't Andor, and most studio-acquired IP hasn't had the luck with new ideas in those spaces. My feelings were the sort of reaction that's hard to put into words, because I didn't have opinions on what was said, but opposition to an implicit question inviting what was said. If you somehow don't know what these properties are, allow me to give you a brief catch-up. Bond belongs to a canon of uncritical spy movies that place evil as its opposition instead of a political idea or simply resistance to the expansion of the empire. You see, Bond is an anti-reality or immaterial fantasy of an imperialist armed with the trappings of civilizing narratives and the white man's burden. So while out gallivanting and representing the British Empire and working with the military might of the CIA, he's depicted as some sort of underdog. Ultimately, he is there for the people's own good, as a benevolent invader and hero. This is a romantic view of the type of behaviours intelligence operatives do on foreign soil. There will be no mention of the CIA hanging people and draining their blood to convince people that vampires hate communism. No discussion of throwing academics from helicopters for opposing Western industry. No, this is the plucky, charming underdog of colonial violence, rizzing his way through apolitical empires. Andor is rooted in direct struggle and real issues despite being a sci-fi show. It follows a worker in an oppressive state as he's brought into conflict with the system. Bond never grapples with the empire he represents so that he can present a sanitized image of heroic imperialism. Kingsman, Jack Ryan, and Mission Impossible might also try to deal with the nature of power, but it's also ultimately to the benefit of the state's involvement and the necessity of the spy's action. They utilize evil, corruption, and other such concepts to present the audience with an uncritical adventurer narrative. Yet the backdrop is military action on foreign soils to advance the interests of a wealthy country that's interested in exploiting a poor one.
Dr. Ryan, 2 days ago, a strike team assassinated Nigerian President Udo. Can you assure this committee that the CIA had no involvement in President Udo's death?
No.
This especially benefits the state when it's about the checks and balances that can be painted as obstacles that actually aid the villain, thus implying our hero has to be unrestrained and able to act outside the law.
I do not report to you.
Yes, but you see my point, though.
Not yet.
Well, my point is that you might appear to be our saving grace when you may in fact be part of the problem.
See Torture in 24 and Jack Bauer. Now, the benevolent invader can kill, blow up, and torture his way through cities of other countries without a single issue for the viewer. Meanwhile, Andor doesn't omit its reality. Where Bond is fantasy, Andor is reality. Strange, since one is set in our world and the other's in space, but the sci-fi has more sensible politics. If Andor is a rebel under oppression resisting imperial forces, then Bond is those imperial forces one has to grapple with. So what can Bond learn from Andor? Well, Andor's success is rooted in the fact it's real and gritty. Andor is even loosely based on the USSR's October Revolution. In the Soviet Union, they pushed a form of art called socialist realism, which actually sought to give realistic depictions of idealized and optimistic heroes. Its aims were to give their people aspired figures. Marxists believe that there's a culture that develops to uphold systems. See eugenics and racism in the United States during slavery, which then, after slavery was ended, created the Jim Crow era and prison labor. Why? Because they never addressed the bigotry in the culture. The USSR tried to replace the Tsarist suppressive regime with a positive one that glorified the working class people and gave them useful narratives and characters to conceptualize their own lives. Andor, in drawing from this time, seems to have tipped into a sort of neo-socialist realism. It gives us a critique of power and complicity with systems and working class heroes and depictions of oppressive structures falling to these communities. Yet it's not idealistic. It has a lens in that space, but it's not afraid to show the cost, the human toll, and the stress on our characters and their efforts. I say all of this to remind you of the fun-time adventure romps of apolitical British spies shooting it out with pure evil in former colonies while saving the day with fancy gadgets. So what can Bond learn from Andor? That if Bond and Andor were in the same conversation, Cassian would be trying to blow James Bond up. Bond can't be about reality without being a tragedy. The real Bond, buried in the lessons of Andor, is Smedley Butler. Smedley Butler of the book War is a Racket, and I quote, wrote,
I spent 33 years, 4 months in military service, and during that time I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle for big business, for Wall Street and bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico and especially Tampico safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped to see that the Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents.
Returning to James Bond, Casino Royale flirted with realism. It gave us gritty violence in a fun movie, yet Daniel Craig's Bond had nothing to say. Because logically, after a career of drowning men in toilets, he'd probably start to wonder what you actually do. Who is it that you serve? Bond and Andor are politically, philosophically, and culturally opposed. Andor is proletarian resistance rooted in studies of rebellion against empires. Bond is the boot of empire. What can Bond learn from Andor? To not exist. If it had half the honesty it would require to answer that question, we'd open on the only thing that makes sense today: a deconstruction of James Bond. You'd have Bond brag about his drinking and his womanizing and his imperial actions, playing on tape recorders in The Hague or a people's court before the film ends with him hanging. Show the real shadow of a Bond. It's the death of men like Andor.